We're going to start this puppy up. Clear, prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week, building the Affordaplane. In this part, we're going to consider that you can't have an aircraft without rudder pedals, a seat, and a place to store your fuel. So in this part, we're going to get right on setting up and fabricating those items. Let's get started. We're at the very front of the fuselage, and here's where the engine goes up here. And right down here is where we're going to put our rudder pedals, so we need to build a support for that. And that is going to consist of a pair of 1.5" by 1.5" by 1/8 angle, 4 inches long. We're going to need 2 of these, and these will be located at the bottom of this gusset here. If you remember, we left out 2 bolts, and that is why. And using your plans, we're going to locate it about 1/2 inch forward of the bolt hole. And we're going to back drill through these holes so that we can mount one of these. Now, one of these will be mounted on the other side, and so there'll be a common bolt that will go through both of them. Eventually, then, we're going to take an 18-incher and mount that underneath, and this is going to become the support for the rudder pedals. So first things first, we need to clamp this in place so that we can mark the holes for this. So I have it clamped in place. The bottom is even with the tube, and we're covering up the 2 holes that we want to drill in. So if I go to the other side and come at it with one of these. This is a pin that's exactly 1/4 inch, and it's got a very sharp point on the end. And this punch pin will allow me to put it through the hole on the other side and then hit it with a hammer, and that will punch a mark on the back side of our piece here. I'll do it for both holes, then I can take it off and drill it. And then we can reverse the procedure to mark the one on the other side. I drilled it up to 1/4 inch, put a bolt through temporarily, and now we'll line it up and punch through the other hole on the other side. Our 2 brackets are now bolted into place. Our next step is to take an 18-inch long, and this is also 1.5" by 1.5" by 1/8 inch thick, so exact same material that we made our brackets out of. And I found the center, and we're going to locate this right underneath here. Now we want the same amount hanging out on this side as we do the other side. So I found the center, and then at 2 5/8 inches off the center, because that's the distance from the center of the tube out to the edge over here. Anyhow, I drew the lines, so that way it makes it very easy to center this left and right. So I'm going to place this underneath as the plans show, and we're going to have 1 bolt on each side going through our mounted bracket and then into this. So let's prepare the holes for that. And I have it clamped in place over here, a hole drilled only through this part, and I got it nice and 90 degrees and found my line. And I'll go ahead and drill Cleco and drill in the other, and then open them up to 3/16 because they will get an AN3 bolt and nut. And the flange of this piece is towards the front. We need the flange here because we'll be attaching a hinge for the rudder pedal over there. And here is the footrest completed with an AN3 bolt. And notice I've rounded off the corners. It only takes a moment to hit the sandpaper and make those corners round. This seemed to be in an area where your leg might hit. Maybe not, but it doesn't take long to sand off the corners with your belt sander and a little Scotch-Brite. Now we're going to fabricate our own rudder pedals. Starts out with a couple of sheets of 90 thou aluminum, and I cut this out 4 by 8. Check your plans. Also rounded the corners because these will be sticking out and you don't want someone to get jabbed by a corner. Most important at the top. And of course notice I have 2 of everything. We got 2 rudders. We got 2 feet, excuse me. Okay, each sheet then is going to need a pair of extrusion angles. This is 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/8, and these are going to end up riveted on the edges. And then we also need a length of hinge, and we'll cut this to go at the bottom, and I'll demonstrate that. And so the first step is lightning holes. This is awful substantial and we're trying to save weight, so if you notice in the plans it has some lightning holes, and the purpose for them is simply to reduce weight, and this is a good time to do it centered, and that relieves some of the metal that isn't that important for strength in this case, and our goal is that 254 pounds. So I'm going to use a hole saw, and I'll mount this on a piece of wood and cut some holes. Need a couple of pilots for this type of hole saw. Be sure if you're doing something like this to clamp your work down to something large, because this really grabs and it'll rip your hand right off, so be careful. Safety first. I weighed 6 of these circles and they came out to 1/8 of a pound. So you can't sneeze at that. Now if I told you in ounces, you wouldn't be impressed. But it was 1/8 of a pound savings, serving no purpose. Your foot won't go through that. Our next step then is to attach the extrusions to the very edge. I cut these slightly shorter than the full length so that the corner isn't sticking out at the very top. So they'll go like this. Now our first step is to mark the rivet hole. So I drew a line down the center and a rivet about every inch. So I'm going to pilot drill hole these first with a drill, 1/8 inch, and then I can place them and match hole drill them into the pedal. These will get riveted on. I've drilled through, and by the way, use a number 30 drill bit because we're putting rivets in here, so I may have said 1/8, but I really mean a number 30, which is several thousandths larger, which will make getting your rivets in a heck of a lot easier. Now once those are drilled, we're going to take our pedal and we're going to line it up along the edge. Now you need to choose a bottom and a top. If our bottom is down here, I'm going to put this flush with the bottom, and then the sides need to be flush. So when you line this up on the table prior to drilling, make sure you use a means to make sure everything is nice and flush, and also flush at the bottom also. As you drill, make sure you cleco as soon as you're finish drilling a hole. That will hold it in place, and once you get a couple clecos in, it makes it a lot easier to go and then drill relatively quickly the rest of the holes. Once that is done, we need to, I'm going to cut a line. This is the bottom, remember, so we knock off this corner. And at the top, we're going to leave the corner, but we're going to round it off real nice because we're going to have a hole up there for a spring. So the bottom gets knocked off, the angle, the top gets rounded off. And we'll take a look. Of course, we're going to repeat for the other side. Same principle. Okay, we are drilled through. We have our cut at the bottom and rounded corner at the top. Have it clecoed on. This is the front now. And we can go ahead and rivet. We're going to use stainless steel 1/8 inch rivets. And of course the grip length has to be such that it's enough to pass through our 90,000th and our 1/8 inch. And on the other side it looks like that. And we want to rivet everything here except the bottom, because the bottom we're going to have a hinge down here, so we'll leave the cleco in there, but we can rivet the rest of these. And we're all done with this side. So we want to repeat with another extrusion on the other side, exactly the same, with a slant at the bottom and rounded corner at the top, and leave the bottom hole open. Now we're going to cut off a piece of hinge that we can use. Now this is MS 20257-3, and basically it's measured going across, and this is 1.5 inches going across when it's open. We only need about this much, 4 inches, so we can cut this. Now there's 2 pieces here, 2 pieces and a hinge pin. You can pull that out in a second. This can be cut with your bandsaw if you have a fine-tooth bandsaw, or you can even use your snips that you use for cutting sheet metal, because this isn't super thick. So I'm going to pull the pin out down here. This just slips out, and when you pull that out, you basically get 2 pieces. A little easier to cut when you remove this, so we'll cut this off and come back and reassemble. Now here's 1/2. Now this is the front of the rudder pedal, and I'm going to place this with the bump forward. With the bump forward, this is going to be mounted at the bottom like this, right on the face, because on the back, we don't want to mount it on the back, otherwise we're going to get a hump underneath here. You could do that, but I think it's a little nicer installation if you put it on the front where it can be flat. And we want to raise it so that the bottom edge is more or less even with the bottom edge of the hinge material. So it would look something like this, so that this area is lined up at the bottom. And of course left to right. I'll probably clamp this and then turn it around, and remember we have our first 2 holes already drilled here, so we'll mark those and drill them, and then we want 3 more holes evenly spaced along this same line, and then we will rivet this in place. Alright, and then of course we're going to disassemble the burr, and then 5 stainless steel rivets in the bottom across there. Here's our hinge installed, and here's the other half of the hinge, which goes right here. Now, with the pin, it's very simple to install and deinstall by just feeding it into the end, lining it up, and slipping it in, and we have it. Now, I have marked out 5 locations. I'm going to drill a number 30 hole in these 5 locations, and then we'll be ready to mount this onto our fuselage. We have our holes drilled. Now we need to cut the hinge. I'm going to cut it about 1 inch long. Keep this end just protruding a little bit, and then I'll cut about 1 inch off here. Keep in mind this hinge material is very hard metal. You may have trouble cutting it with a wire cutter, so make sure you use a heavy-duty one, or you can use a cut-off wheel to cut this material. So cut it off about 1 inch long, because we'll end up bending it up and securing it so it doesn't come out. Then we'll take this up to the fuselage. Now, prior to putting our rudder pedal on, we also need to make a 3/16 hole in the edge that is going to be inboard, and also a tiny hole. Mine is a 1/8 inch hole up at the top. That's where we may attach a spring, and down here is the rudder cable connection. Now, for mounting this on our rudder cross piece, 1 inch in from the edge, and the rudder, of course, facing towards us. The hinge will sit up here, and you can feel it stop when the barrel, which is up front on this, touches the edge here. So it's very easy to place, and we'll have it 1 inch from the edge. So I'm basically going to mark through the holes these locations for the rivets we will draw. So I will drill and cleco as we go, and this is sitting nice and firmly on top of the ledge here. With the holes drilled, we can now rivet into those locations. And here we have the rivets in place, and our rudder pedal is essentially done. Of course, we have to repeat this on the other side, and a spring eventually will hold this in place, and a cable, of course, will be attached here going to the rear. And we will affix the hinge pin so that it cannot leave, and we'll do that a little bit later. Now I'm going to install a bracket for the fuel tank, and that's going to be mounted on this vertical tube right at this line. That line is about 1 inch above the gusset, and so it'll go like this. It'll be centered on this tube, and then we'll have a bigger plate go on top of that, and then the gas tank on top of that. So to prepare this angle, I have drawn 2 lines that'll help me center it on the tube, because this is 4 inches long, and this is a 1.5 by 1.5 extruded angle, and that is 1/8 inch thick. So I have chosen 4 rivets, more or less equally spaced. These are going to be 3/16 rivets by the time we're done. I drilled them out to 1/8, and we'll mark them after I line this up carefully, and then I can drill and cleco. Our bracket is clecoed in place, 4 3/16 holes, and then we have a 6x6 piece of 090, and I've rounded off the corners, make it look a little nicer, and this will go on top of our plate, and this becomes the base of our fuel tank. I'm going to clamp this in place for the moment, and the idea is that your gas tank will sit on top of it. I took the bracket, and on the opposite face I laid out 5 rivet holes. This is the side that went up against our vertical tube. This side will go against our plate. Notice I drew 2 lines so that I could easily center it, and it's important to keep this back even with that back while drilling, so do something like that to get it all lined up. And then I will transfer these 5 holes into our plate, open them all up to 3/16, and they're all going to get riveted from the other side. Okay, both pieces have been drilled out. Now, I decided to change this to a 2x2 angle just to give a little more room and contact area. Everything else is the same. I'm going to go now and rivet this onto the vertical tube, and that'll give me enough room so I can get the rivet gun in here, and then once that's in place, we'll rivet the top on. These are 3/16 stainless steel rivets that we're putting in. And now we can put the top plate on. The idea is we have a platform for our fuel tank, for example this one here, and of course this would be tied off with a strap at the top and then one around the tube back here. But we need to keep everything nice and light. I wonder what this weighs as a fuel tank. We will get to the seat first thing next time. In the meantime, everyone, please, back to building.